All right. Well, thank you, Amy, and welcome everybody. We're here today to present from lease to ledger, leveraging Visual Lease and AI to manage abstraction and CAM reconciliation. We're pleased to have a great panel of experts today, and we're going to roll through some introductions here to start with. But first, let me give you the all-important CPE information, and I'll keep this short. To receive CPE credit, you must be here for at least 50 minutes. That's 50, and answer a minimum of 3 polling questions. And there's going to be 4 opportunities to answer a polling question, so should be easy to get that. And then you're going to get your certificate from certificates at simplecert.net. And if you would just give us about a week to get those processed, and that'll help all the CPAs out there qualify. I mean, we're getting close to the end of the year, right? So we're all thinking about that CPE right now. All right, so diving in, let's do some introductions. My name is Matt Waters, and I'm a CPA, so I'll be looking for that certificate too. But I work at CoStar Real Estate Manager, been here for about 10 years, and we have a software that automates lease accounting, lease administration. But before that, all in all, I've been working in lease accounting and lease administration for about 20 years, and worked at Home Depot where I helped get ready for the lease accounting changes, ASC 842, and then IFRS 16 was coming online around the same time. And also worked at American Tower, which is a big cell phone tower company. Actually, it's one of the largest REITs or real estate investment trusts in the world, and we had hundreds of thousands of leases there. And we got a bunch of exciting stuff going on in the industry. We're going to talk about AI today, which is certainly a hot topic. Another exciting thing that we have, I'll mention on this next slide, we now have our own professional designation in the lease accounting profession. And I'll just say, when I joined LinkedIn, this was when I worked at Home Depot, there were probably 5 people, and I actually remember this because I looked when I joined. There were 5 people on LinkedIn with lease accounting in their job title, and I was one of them. Now there are thousands of people with lease accounting in their job title. And so we just decided it's time that we had our own professional designation. And that's why we now have the CGLA designation, Certified Global Lease Accountant. You get CPE for completing this as well, actually 16 hours of CPE. And it's been recognized in Accounting Today as a great new opportunity for lease accountants. And another exciting thing we have going on is the Lease Alert podcast, which I am honored to get to host. And we have conversations on the podcast with really smart, interesting people like Bill and Harbinder. And we talk about things beyond lease accounting, right? We talk about lease administration, we talk about real estate, we talk about AI, we talk about law, even because, right, every lease is a legal contract. And we just cover a lot of ground there, but mainly uh, get some conversations going. It's about a 20-minute podcast, so you can easily check that out on a commute or something like that. And I'd be honored if you would. All right, moving on. Let me allow Bill to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Matt. I'm Bill Harter. I'm just about 9 years now with the combined Visual Lease CoStar REM platform. But before that, I've been better than 30 years in the industry, which is why they now call me the principal solutions consultant. It just means I've been around for a while and I've seen a lot of stuff. But I like to always tell people I spent the first half of my career on the landlord side. The majority of that was with Phillips Edison. We were buying distressed shopping centers and grocery anchor shopping centers, redeveloping them, turning them around. And so I saw real estate leasing from the landlord perspective. I moved up from there over to CBRE and Global Corporate Services, where I spent all of my time on the occupier side, so I saw it from the tenant perspective. We had transaction management and lease administration and projects and facilities management, a lot of strategic planning as well. So I've taken that 30 years of experience and now I'm putting it to use in what I like to call my third half of my career here with CoStar Visual Lease, advising clients on how to utilize the platform to meet their specific needs. So with that, I'll toss it over to Harbinder.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill and Matt. Just a little background myself, Harbinder Khera. I'm one of the founders of RE Back Office. So currently, I'm the CTO of RE Back Office, lead the AI practice. Just a little bit of personal background. So just the company we founded almost 19 years ago. But actually going back 32 years ago, this is really where I first got introduced to AI during my second master's in computer science and electrical engineering. And since then, I've heavily, invested a lot of my personal time in other businesses that we have founded that really invested in AI. How AI is transforming, not just the real estate space, but other areas. And certainly, I'm going to talk about, how AI and the AI, how we see today, the deep learning, how it's really transforming the CAM reconciliation process. So excited to be on this webinar today.
Wow, that's impressive, Harbinder. 32 years ago, already thinking about AI. I think most people think and, I'll group myself in this, right? I would have said AI has been a thing for like 10 years, maybe, right? And maybe when ChatGPT came out is when a lot of people started thinking about AI, or and of course it's certainly very prominent now. But 32 years ago, wow, what kind of conversations were you having 32 years ago about AI?
So just not to bore everybody on the call today, it's just more about, if you think about AI today is more about deep learning.
Hmm.
But the technology to do deep learning actually existed, I would say 32, 34 years ago. Okay.
Mm,
And how you train these models, that technology, obviously there's a different techniques, but there's obviously technique that is now modern transformer technique that all the GPTs are built on. But that technology existed. What actually happened in the last 4 or 5 years? NVIDIA, if you look at the chip that we all have used in the gaming technology, made it possible to use it for computing, to compute all the information you need to process
mm,
for this modern large language models that we're discussing. That is number one. So
yeah.
computing was possible today. We used to do this computing in old CPUs. This would take
Mhm.
days and months. That literally what is done in minutes and seconds. That is
Yeah.
number one. Number two, uh, OpenAI, and we hear about ChatGPT, literally commoditized it,
Mm,
and so that a common person can actually use the technology in day-to-day use. And that's why, if you think about it, they have over 800 million, a billion users, and most of them are people like us in a non-business setting, in a sense they're using for personal use. And
hmm.
that's what really the OpenAI slash Microsoft made it possible where everybody has access to this technology.
Yeah.
So that is really
Mm.
what has happened, and now we're discussing today, how this is transforming our space.
Mm.
Cool. Fascinating. Well, yeah, thank you for that overview. I was just curious. And that brings up another point I'll just make briefly, and then we'll go through this this agenda. But the companies you mentioned, all of them, NVIDIA, OpenAI, Microsoft, I could go on and on. Google, all of those companies, Oracle, all of those companies are creating opportunities to, with technology to streamline the way we work. All of those companies also have huge lease administration and lease accounting departments, and they're
Hmm.
using their own technology to do this. I've heard many of them speak about how AI is transformed, even in their internal departments. So this, really, as I mentioned when I was talking about the CGLA program, the the opportunities in lease administration and lease accounting have really exploded, as a part of this. A lot of people think, that AI is going to reduce the number of jobs, but think about how many leases there are associated with data centers. It's so many. So the opportunities are actually expanding, and AI just, in my opinion, AI gives us a fighting chance to get all this work done, right? But with that setting the stage, let me just walk through this brief outline, and then I'll turn it over to Bill to dive into our topics. After attending the webinar today, you'll be able to describe how to integrate AI into Visual Lease, workflows for CAM reconciliation, turn unstructured lease data into actionable financial protections, and prepare for year-end reconciliations. And that means CAM reconciliations, or other operating expense type reconciliations with AI-driven abstraction and invoice validation, and discuss real-world case studies of savings that can occur as a part of all this. So switching over to the next one, Bill.
All right, so a lot of very deep stuff you guys have been talking about here, but let me take it back to the basics, if you will. We're talking about AI for CAM reconciliation. Well, what is CAM reconciliation? Well, that actually then takes us back to what is CAM. So, as you all probably are aware, CAM, sometimes referred to as OpEx, slight differences there, but the principles are basically the same. An occupier of space, whether it be office, retail, whatever the purpose, typically is going to pay a fee for the right to use the premises, for the lease of the space, but also then make a contribution, pay a share of the cost of operating the property. We're going to call that CAM, common area maintenance, or OpEx, operating expenses. Now, the structure of camera OpEx can be quite different depending upon the type of property that we're dealing with. But typically, all things that go into there is maintenance of the shell, the structure, any areas that are not demised to a single tenant, parking areas, landscaping, snow removal, janitorial service if you're an office space. All of those things go into that. Now, the tenants are going to all pay their share. The structure of that payment can vary. In a retail space, you're basically just going to pay a pro rata or proportionate share of every penny of that expense. In an office space, we may have what we call modified gross, where the base year, the very first year's expenses are subsumed into the base rent. You're going to pay a share of any increases. There's all kinds of different variations on that. And those aren't so important as to understand that typically the landlords are going to ask you to pay a contribution towards that with every month's or every quarter's rent as you're paying it. Now, because it's a reimbursement for actual expenses, there's a process spelled out in the lease document that the landlord's going to go back and look at the actual expenses for the year and true things up. If the tenant contributions weren't enough, they're going to look for more from the tenants. If the tenants have over contributed, they can get credits back or hold that off for a prepayment of the following year's expenses. How that's done, that process of truing up estimated payments to actual expenses, is the reconciliation process. So with that background, let's go ahead into our first polling question, because after all, you are here for continuing education credit, so you got to get 3 out of these 4.
All right, so let's dive into this one. What's your biggest challenge with CAM reconciliations today? And if you just lock in those answers, could be inconsistent or incomplete lease data, manual or error-prone calculations, lack of visibility into obligations and caps, or time spent managing disputes or overcharges. And I'll give everybody a few moments to participate in this. No right or wrong answers here. We're just trying to get a pulse, if you will. What's your biggest challenge with CAM reconciliations today? And I've got three teenagers at home, and I don't know if y'all know this, but teenagers, maybe every generation, they create their own language, and so I've heard a lot lately. My sons will say things, and then the other one will say that's cap. I call cap, and in teenager language or middle school language now, cap means you're lying. So I was at the NRTA conference recently, and Harbinder and Bill were there with me, but I was sitting in a presentation, and there's a slide. It was all about caps, and and I took a picture of it and sent it to my sons. I was like, you know, this is cap. But anyway,
You're making me
I
feel old, Matt.
yeah, maybe that'll
All
help
right.
somebody out.
All right, let's go. It looks like things have leveled off. Let's go and end the poll and show the result. Okay. So it looks like kind of brought across the board here. Manual error-prone calculation seems to be the top response, but inconsistent data, lack of visibility are right up there as well. So, plus it's sort of timely. So, all right.
Great.
So with that, let me slide back down here. Talk about that process now of going through. So, yeah, in my history, again, we've already established it's longer than I like to admit to. Uh, I've always gone through CAM reconciliations as an Excel spreadsheet process. So the problem is every lease negotiates things a little bit differently. And you may have certain things capped, not capped. Every landlord's going to have a little different process for calculating overhead expenses and such. So you've got to build all of that into the modeling. It's all part of the process of figuring out what the proper CAM reimbursements reconciliation are. Fortunately, we've got tools available in the software. CoStar REM has a tool, which we're seeing here. Visual Lease also has a tool where you can establish just what those policies are, what gets counted, and put in the actual numbers and run through that mathematical process in order to get things right. But these are models that have to be built out. And the models, take a little bit of an art. So this is an area where I want Harbinger to really dive into understanding what those rules are and building the structure that you put into the audit tool really is the challenge that we're all facing. But there's a excellent reason to make that investment because there are some significant savings that can be realized by going through these audits. So, Harbinder, you've been doing this for a while. What kind of savings are you seeing as an example?
Absolutely. And one of the things that we hear a lot that, hey, I got a store in a strip mall or in a shopping complex, smaller footprint. Maybe I don't have that much of savings. But one thing that we have seen is doesn't matter, regardless of the size of your property. We have seen across a lot of our clients, there's a lot of savings. If you're doing your CAM reconciliation properly, and I will get into the details that, that could be calculation errors or misrepresentation or duplicate entries. Yes, you will see the savings. You will see that, yes, even if you're looking at from a landlord perspective, on a tenant perspective, people are who are calculating stuff on the other side, putting stuff into the from capturing data from a lease and then putting into the system. People make mistakes. And so when we start going through the reconciliation process, there's definitely we have found significant savings. And obviously, there's a lot more savings when you're looking at a bigger size property. So, and AI in this process helps make it better and facilitates the faster in terms of data collection and aggregation. That's something that I'll get into, but definitely there are a lot of savings across the board. Now, if you think about, I'll quickly touch upon this process. And if you think about it, there's a lot of time spent, and two things I want to walk away from this. Yes, it takes time to do a CAM reconciliation, go through the process. If you're a tenant, obviously there's, you're dealing with a lot of invoices, information that's coming your way from a landlord. And there's a lot of input data that is what's in your lease. And not just when you think about CAM, it's not just in what's the common area maintenance charges, but you're also looking at insurance and taxes, real estate taxes, and your share. So, yeah, so you have to account for all that data. You have to organize it. You have to see what's in the lease, and you have a lot of different information coming, and you have to process it and do the adjustment. It might, can take a lot of time, between approximately 4 to 20 hours per location. The reason I put 20 hours, there's a lot of data that time it takes, because you have to go back and forth with the landlord, get the information, reconcile it, and they have to give you all the data. So that's why you have to. It takes time, especially when you're looking from a landlord perspective. There's a lot of data that you need. Like they have any given property, you have multiple locations that you're working, multiple tenants. So they have to communicate with a lot of tenants. So there's obviously, depending upon how many tenants you have on a given property, that there's a lot more time. Okay. So that is really the important aspect of, it takes time. And then there's a savings, and there's as because you have to process, it takes time because you have to process a lot of data.
Poll question number two. How are you currently managing your CAM reconciliations? And the options here are manually in spreadsheets, partially automated using internal controls or internal tools, excuse me, integrated with lease management software, or outsourced to a third party. And again, the question is, how are you currently managing your CAM reconciliations? And I'll remind everybody, there is a Q&A panel that you have access to, and you can pull that up and send us your questions, and we'll address as many of those as we possibly can by the end of the webinar. And that's through the Q&A panel. All right, let me give you another few seconds to answer the poll question. Remember, you got to get 4 of these, or you got to get 3 of these, 3 out of 4 to get CPE credit. But looks like everybody who wants to respond has already. So let's see the results. All right, great. Yeah, manually in spreadsheets certainly would be an area where it's ripe for some efficiencies. And good news is we're going to talk a lot more about that as we go through.
Great. All right, thanks, Matt. So, you know, as we've discussed, having that manual and spreadsheets is going to be somewhat problematic, and you've got always the issue with sharing data like that. Anytime auditors are looking to see information manually entered in spreadsheets, that's always a bit of a problem. So, uh, getting information into a platform like Visual Lease or like CoStar is going to be a key to having an accurate CAM reconciliation. So with that said, what are some of I don't know if we're sharing the screen yet again or not. So
Yeah, I can see your screen,
you
Bill.
can see the screen.
Yep,
Okay,
yep.
good. Thanks. Um, Sorry about that. I don't know where that glitch came from earlier, but you can see here. I don't need to go into a lot of detail here, but obviously the key question is to look at the expenses that were billed versus what the actual expenses are? And can we get back into invoices for the utilities and maintenance, property taxes, just as Harbinder was talking about? Always find that there's going to be an issue with management fees and administrative because that's not a direct expense. That's the property management firm giving themselves a little piece of the action, if you will. And the mathematics can be quite complex. Cap limits are expenses properly placed into capped categories versus uncapped categories, and have those caps been calculated properly? Are there things that are in there that shouldn't be? Are capital expenses sneaking their way in? All of these are various different data points that you have to look at in order to do your reconciliation process. Now, the data does become subject to lots of different reconciliation errors. First off, is the estimate of the fees to be paid over the course of the year, was that done correctly in the first place? You could get a really big surprise at the end of the year if that estimate was woefully underestimated, and companies may not be prepared to write a really big check at the first of the year when you do the reconciliation. Calculation errors, anytime you're doing that manual spreadsheet, that is definitely an area where errors can be made. It's not always intentional, just math can be done wrong. You can be referencing the wrong cell and such. Wrong sales tax rates can be put in. Cap may not be applied to expenses that really should be considered controllable. Maybe the wrong percentage of the cap was used. What was the base that the cap was built off of? You start seeing cap errors that can really accumulate year over year and can be a significant impact. Are you double charged for things? Maybe something shows up as a mechanical expense and as a contract expense at the same time. Real discipline has to be applied. And this is the discipline that the management company has to apply to their charges. And then you have to be able to see, to reconcile that those charges were accounted for properly into your particular CAM formulas. And finally, are there things that are included in the expenses that shouldn't be? Did the landlord have to go out and buy a piece of equipment and they're trying to pass that charge through to the tenants? I've seen that one happen quite a good bit. There are other types of things. Maybe if the landlord doesn't pay a fee on time, and they have to pay a late fee on some sort of a charge. Well, if they mismanage the payment, that shouldn't be passed along to the tenants. They should be responsible for eating that. So those are all some of the types of reconciliation errors that we often come up with. So once again, we've got a lot of experience. Harbinder's team has a lot of experience on savings that can be spotted through this reconciliation process. So, can you tell us, Harbinder, about a couple of examples maybe that you've come up with?
Yeah, one of the things when I was looking at the poll, I saw that a lot of people still using Excel. Obviously, Excel is the best tool ever, and a lot of clients, who are using combination of, let's say Visual Lease tool platform where the data sits, and then use the Excel to reconcile everything. So just to kind of add to that, but it really comes down to accurate data capturing in the tool first. That's the first step. And so based on our experience, just as what you see a quick case study here. Just in the pilot phase, I don't want to share the numbers and there was over 500,000 across all locations. That's where they're able to get just in the pilot phase, saving of $62,000. Okay. And that is important. And sometimes we take things for granted. But the important thing is you can actually, my advice is that do a random audit pick one of the locations. If you have multiple locations, say, hey, let's try that. And if you see, do a, like a quick random audit and pick a couple of locations of different types and different location, different landlords. And then you can do a quick litmus test and say, yep, this is correct. And that'll give you an idea. If you really need to audit your complete reconciliation across your portfolio, or you don't need to do that. So that would be my recommendation.
Great, thank you for that. So, just as an example, we can see here, Harbinder's given us some real world examples. The details, the numbers here aren't quite as important as just to show the complexity that is involved. So here we're looking at, common area maintenance, looking at various different categories. You've got gross up calculations maybe that have to be done. Figure what the expense would be, maybe if the property were 95% occupied, break this down into various different categories, changes in other occupancies during the course of the year. I know from my retail experience, the pool of uh, that you're dividing, that you're prorating the expenses over, some expenses may include the anchor tenants, some expenses may not include the anchor tenants. So a lot of complexity that's going to be involved with this. So we'll be getting into examples of how you're going to use AI to weave through that complexity and understand the challenge. So with that, Matt, let's go to that third poll question.
You got it. All right. Looking at poll question number 3. How confident are you in the accuracy of your CAM billing data? And the options on this one are very confident, somewhat confident, not confident, or unsure. So please lock in those answers. Certainly, if you are here for CPE credit, that'll help. How confident are you in the accuracy of your CAM billing data?
And if for some reason your pop-up blocker is not allowing that to pop up, if you go to the bottom of your Zoom, you can find the poll link down there.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Okay, just a few more seconds to, if you needed to pull up that poll link from the bottom banner on your Zoom app. All right, yeah, I think everybody's probably locked in who is answering this one, and yeah, across the board on that. Bill, back to you.
All right. So with that said, let me go on to the next step here. So now we get to the meat. This is what everyone's come on board for. The role of AI in transforming CAM reconciliation. So Harbinder, you established your credentials talking about things from 34 years ago. Let me turn it over to you.
No, thank you. I think I want to do a little bit of a level set, and I think it's important because we hear about AI, and obviously the last 2 years, we've been hearing about Chat GPT. If you think about AI actually, if you guys use Netflix and watch movies on Netflix, they're already using AI, and that goes back 10 years or 15 years. When you think about AI, is like has got many different components. One is machine learning. That is really the first phase of AI. And a recommendation of movies. That's learning. It's more mathematical. It's more linear algebra. So it's more mathematical based. It's statistical based, and that is what the machine learning has been there for years. And vision, and photo vision recognition, all the stuff that is part of the machine learning. Now, the deep learning, that is obviously the what we see today, and that we hear about LLMs and large language models and OpenAI, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, that is all part of the deep learning. And that technology has been commoditized thanks to all these big mega players, and it's not cheap, but they have commoditized for us. And their hope is that we all start using at scale, especially mostly on the enterprises side. If you think about today, they have over 800 million or close to billion users. Out of that, 20 million are the enterprise paying customers. So they're making some money, but they're not making enough money. But it's basically it's an investment. They're hoping that that 20 million number goes up to 100 million from the business's perspective. So that is what we see today. Now, if you think about how AI is playing an important role in the real estate world, it is all about converting the unstructured data into knowledge. Okay, that is the key. There's a lot of unstructured data. So what is unstructured data when you think about when you in our space and you talked about Cam, one is obviously the lease agreements. Lease agreements historically and everything is in unstructured format. If it's in documents, amendments, if you look at master agreement, amendments, you have site letters, all the emails floating around, and that is all part of the unstructured data. Okay. And the invoice information, there's a lot of information in invoices. How do you capture that at scale? Okay. So when you think about technology, especially in the use cases for CAM reconciliation, it really starts with organizing all your documents. And as I said, there are multiple documents when you look at CAMREC and going back to the input. Obviously, you have the lease agreements, you have invoices, side letters, estoppels. You have a lot of that information that goes into it. So the first step is obviously taking those documents and renaming them. A lot of times when you have these invoices you get, they're not properly properly named. So you got to make sure that for your reference check, if you need to go back and look at the information, so you want to make sure that everything is properly renamed. And then the first step after that is you do the OCR of the data. And then you basically, the process is you start converting the unstructured data into a more structured format. So now, one of the important aspects here is, you have a lot of invoices, okay? And a lot of invoice and a lot of documents, especially even a master lease, and then you have amendments. There could be some missing amendments, okay? So you want to make sure that you're identifying all these documents, and AI. What AI allows you to do to read these documents in the background and find out what document is there, should not be there, and rename them, organize them, because you want to make sure the latest amendment is ordered properly in that sequence. And then when you start looking at the invoices, there are many type of invoices you're going to get. So, and plumbing and utility invoices, so you're looking at the dates and the type of invoice, categorizing it, and putting into a bucket. And sometimes the interesting part is you will see out of sequence invoices as well. And then I'll talk about some of the fraud alerts and detection. And sometimes you get invoices from vendors where not something you can recognize. So you can set up flags and say, yep, I've been seeing this grass mowing service and something we can't recognize. And after a while, you see a pattern, you want to challenge it, double check it. And you can look at the unstructured, if they have a website, double check if it's a real company or not a real company, or you want to verify it. So the important part here is the first is identifying missing documents. A lot of times in the agreements, they're missing commencement dates. So the key here is finding the right data and abstracting the right data. And that is one of the most important things when you start dealing with AI. Okay. Identifying what is there and what is not there. Okay. So let's start from a lease abstraction perspective. That is actually the backbone of CAM reconciliation process. When you think about a lease, obviously, the lease has got a lot of everything is in unstructured format. Everything CAM is in information, insurance, taxes, and a bunch of paragraphs and clauses in different sections. The key here is how do you abstract that data in a more meaningful format? So, obviously in a paragraph, it says, yes, you will be charged for gas and electric, and there's a cap on this, and this is all there in a paragraph or multiple paragraphs spanning across multiple pages. So when you want to go back and use that information for your recon, will take some time. You have to really see, yes, are we supposed to be charged for gas or no? Okay. And that is the key. So how do you abstract that data and you store it in platforms like Visual Lease and CoStar REM is the very, very important aspect. So that means you have to do a prep work, making sure you have the right fields being defined and set in your platform. So if you are doing it in currently in an Excel, that is great, but you got to make sure that data is properly abstracted because then only you can do comparison between expected and actual. And that's where you start seeing the savings. Otherwise, as what Bill was showing you, the errors are all, miscalculations, multiple documents coming in. A lot of times, the human error and inclusions. You're not supposed to be paying something. Your landlord is asking to pay. Some proper caps are not properly set. Or, again, there's a lot of multitude of reasons that why you see the discrepancy when you start doing the cam recon. And as we think about this, what AI is trying to do is trying to capture this data, automate it, understand the data, and organize it for you so that you can do this cam recon process at scale. Okay. So that is important. So then here's another example. If you think about what we do, what the tool does, it looks at all the invoices information and start looking at and putting in populating the Excel. So Bill, if you go to the next slide. Yes, please. Thank you. So here's a perfect example. Okay. You have all these invoices coming through, reading and organizing by month. And then what is billed versus what should be in the agreement. So you're putting everything again, you're organizing it and you start seeing the differences. Now, you can do this manually, 100%. That's what people have been doing. And if you have multiple locations, even for a single location, it's a tedious process, getting everything organized, getting everything set. So this is really where the AI comes and plays an important role. It captures the data and does it for you across, and then helps you automate it on an ongoing basis. That is the key. And this is really where you see the value of bringing the unstructured data and putting into a structured format. So this is exactly what it's doing, taking all the data that is in unstructured format and then bringing it into a structured format in Excel or a tool like Visual Lease. Now, so the other important aspect is I'm trying to go through a couple of these slides here fast. It's the question about communication. You want to communicate with the landlord. And so everything is based on, or landlord wants to communicate with the tenant, depending upon how this is, which side you're on. So the important thing is based on the findings and the information you need, automatically crafting in an email for the landlord or for the tenant, and based on what information that is missing is AI. This is one of the important things that all of us are pretty used to, are using ChatGPT or inbuilt AI tools that we have within Outlook or Gmail, and that is the key. Again, taking that information, quickly creating a message out of that. Okay. Now, when we think about the future of AI, one of the things that fraud detection is one of the key areas. That something is humanly not possible, where you can match the data that is out there in the unstructured format, and then doing the trend analysis, seek out again out of sequence invoices, or you flagging certain vendors that you feel they're suspicious, you want to double check them. And again, there's a lot of fraud happens. We think that people are inherently not doing it, but there are times that we have seen. So AI really helps manage it and helps you detect it. And again, depending upon the size of your portfolio, and this is one of the areas we feel that AI can definitely is a game changer. And then is also the other aspect is the predictive or trend analytics that you can look at the historical data, current data, that you can do some projections, cash flow projections, and outflows and inflow, and you can do some predictive analytics around the data set. Now, the other important area that is not here, where the AI is playing such an important role, is where you can access data in Visual Lease and REM via an agent, where natural language access. So you could be on your phone driving and say, hey, can I get information on that lease on particular kind? And I'm trying to find out XYZ data, that you can take a natural language and use that information and get the extracted data out of Visual Lease. That is powerful. Not able to log in. So you don't have to log in, but you can act and you say, hey, find the information. You can say, hey, find all the leases that are in City of Bridges, and that is Pittsburgh. And it finds that it makes a correlation that, hey, let me find all the properties in City of Bridges, that's Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania. And you can do a distance, say, hey, find me a property that is closer to this location, and see if you can, it knows the location and finds the distance between two addresses, and it gives you all that information just like that. That is how AI is transforming our space.
That's all great information, Harbinder. Why don't we go on to our final poll question? And so everyone can, oh, hang on. Mouse is in the wrong place. Sorry, everyone.
That happens. All right. Final poll question. Where are you in your journey with AI for lease management? And the options on your pop-up screen are just starting, actively testing, already using it, or unsure where to begin. I'll give you a few more minutes to lock that in. And while you're locking those in, let me address a question that popped up in the Q&A. Does abstraction mean extraction of key data from unstructured documents? And I'd say, yeah, pretty much. I mean, although you could say that a lease in many cases is a structured document. I mean, they're typically, pretty standard clauses that lease administration professionals are looking for. But generally, when we use the word abstraction, we're talking about what has traditionally been a lease administration person reading a lease and then taking the key components of that lease and putting it into a system in an organized format. And, for example, you need the rent that you have to pay on a set schedule, and you need the dates that you have to give notice of certain things to the landlord. And the list really goes on and on. There are hundreds of data points that get abstracted, or copied over from the legal document into a system to organize those things. So that's really what we're talking about when we say abstracting. It's getting the data, and the way you put it, I think, is pretty accurate from an unstructured, or maybe another way of saying that would be a non-standardized document, right? Because leases can take all different forms, but getting that non-standard information into a standard format is quite useful. And now, of course, we've heard that there's potential to do that now with AI. Anything that Bill or Harbinder you would add to that?
Absolutely. Let me add something quick. That it's a fine line between, we talk about extraction and abstraction. Extraction, abstraction. So let me just quickly, and I agree with Matt. So there's a lot of sections, a lot of information where AI allows you to extract. Okay. But then there's a lot of information that you abstract. Okay. Now, when we look at abstraction, so the two parts are also happening. Let's look at a financial data. A lot of times, depending upon, one is if, dates, let's say commencement date. Sometimes they'll say commencement date starts 01/01/2024. And sometimes they'll say January 1st, year 2024. Very spell that out. Okay. Now, but your tool needs to take, a tool is only looking for 0101 2024. And so the key in this case is you're extracting it, then you converting into a format that your tool needs it so that for processing. So in this case, it is extraction and processing and format conversion going on. Number one. And then we start looking at clauses as an example. Again, as I mentioned, especially CAM, information is in paragraph. It needs to be abstracted in a way that you're summarizing it, or it needs to be
Hmm.
abstracted in a way that somebody says, hey, I want to abstract in a way that I want to look at all the utilities that I'm responsible for, and I want to get an answer yes or no. Okay. Very black and white. So when I go back and do my comparison and I want to be very clear. Anybody looking at the CAM, and not just the CAM, but also any business related function related, you want a very precise answer, yes or no. Can I put a red box in outside my store? Can I change my signage? Yes or no. Okay. So then you can take that data for better running your operations of your, when we think about real estate, one is the financial data that you need to pay rent and everything else. Then you need operational data to run your business. So how well do you
Mhm.
extract and summarize and convert into the right format? That's where the AI can really help scale it.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would definitely agree with that, Matt. I would say that the extraction was taking the data to take it out of AI. Extraction is taking that legal language and dropping it in the document. Abstraction is making it readable to a layperson. And,
Yeah.
you want to be able to refer back to the legal document should you need it. But tell me, tell me what it says without my having to have a JD to be able to interpret it.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, let's share. Thank you both for your responses there, and yeah, it looks like a lot of people are starting to explore AI or actively testing tools. So that's great. Um, all right.
Great. So let me take it here, Matt. Harbinder, you brought up a lot of points, and I'm a fan of this stuff. Working for a technology company, of course, I pretty much have to be. But let me play the devil's advocate, play the Luddite role, if you will. I know there's concerns. Everybody's not necessarily jumping on board this. Some people have some issues. I know one we've heard a lot about is the tendency for AI to hallucinate or make things up. How do we deal with that? How do we protect against that in CAM reconciliation?
No, it's a very good question. A couple of things I want to add, and I saw the survey result, and I want to add to that. And for people who are exploring it, actively testing, and then somebody who just doesn't know where to begin, my recommendation is start with your lease administration platform provider. Okay, they are sitting on the data, and they're the one actively bring in AI technology on top of their data. So start your journey with them first. That's
Hmm.
number one. I wanted to start that. I want to mention that's a key point because otherwise it gets get really confusing. Where do you start? Now, coming back to your question, Bill, hallucination, yes, it is part of the journey. Think about where AI is today. I still consider 1.0. And, it started off as a co-pilot. Now people are talking about as your teammate. But still, yes, it is there. The key here is if you send precise information that to abstract or summarize with proper guardrails, it will give you a much better results and with minimal hallucination. So that's number one. And it's all data driven. If you send the garbage data to AI, it's going to get a garbage back. So you got to make sure you're sending the right information. Now, coming back to inaccuracy of the stuff, yes, there's a chance because how these systems are designed. And that's why, at Artie back office, even if we're using all the AI tools, we still have multiple levels of human in the loop or the QC in place to double check it.
Hmm.
We're double checking it because we are responsible for the accuracy. Tool at this point, AI is helps us to become more efficient. But at the same time, we're using human in the loop and multiple levels of QC to make sure the data is accurate. Okay, but we're getting there. If you think about it, it's a 1.0, but years to come, and that things are going to get better and better and better. So that's how we see it.
That's good to know. Now, I know it does take a lot of data to train a large language model, and AI has to be voracious at reading and consuming this data. But companies view their data as proprietary. How do we honor their data privacy as at the same time we're feeding this ever hungry monster?
That's another very important topic. You talked about data governance, privacy, and then the risk goes in hand. But the important thing is how this data is being used. So, what we have done is, if you look at some of we use the enterprise API from OpenAI, from Gemini, and they have as part of their agreement with us that data is never shared or trained on LLMs. Okay,
Hmm.
so after the work gets done, they discard the data. Legally, they're supposed to discard it, and that is part of their agreement with us. But if you use ChatGPT will say, yes, that data will be used for training. So I'm highly encouraging everybody, don't start copying leases into it, depending upon what version you have. At least in the free version, they're using it. Okay.
Right.
So don't copy paste your lease agreements because that data will be utilized. But one thing that I will certainly add to this, these training models have been trained on billions of data points. Okay. It's like ocean. Now,
Hmm.
even if you use like adding a drop to the ocean is not going to make that much of difference, but still the drop is being added to the ocean. Okay. In some shape or form, somewhere there's a ripple might show up. But again, it's, you're trying to influence a very big data set. So again, use the APIs, you work with the vendors that use the APIs that actually will guarantee making sure that your data is kept secure and with the proper governance in place. And that also helps you mitigate risk.
Great.
Okay, that
Good
is
point.
kind of go hand in hand with that.
Good points. Well, Harbinder, you and I have been talking an awful lot here. Let's see how effective we've been. Matt, could you give us some key takeaways from this?
Absolutely, yeah, and I think I'll just keep this very brief. I see we have like 30 seconds left in the webinar, but just that this is fascinating. There is no doubt that we're going to see change in our profession, in lease administration, in CAM reconciliations, in lease accounting, and way beyond that, right? And we're already seeing that. So really appreciate the insights that both you, Bill, and Harbinder brought. I know as we switch to the next slide, we're all happy to contact for you to contact us. We're active on LinkedIn. You can find us that way, and we'd love to continue the discussion with you, or answer any questions that you didn't get a chance to ask today. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Harbinder. And Amy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Matt. That does conclude today's presentation. And if you haven't done so already, if you'll go ahead and grab that link from the chat and fill out the survey, that would be much appreciated. And for your CPE certificates, please be on the lookout for an email from certificates@simplecert.net within the next week to 10 days following this presentation. And with that, we thank you for your attendance, and you may disconnect at any time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.